The other tab that teachers go to and is the teacher's main working tab is the Classes tab. So I'll click on it. Now you'll notice as soon as I click on the Classes tab, it automatically goes to the training monitor. And the training monitor is where educators can see in real time what the students are doing. So rather the students are in front of you, or say you happen to be in a classroom and a student is working in the library, you can go to the Classes tab. It will default to the training monitor and see what the students are doing. And again, if all of your students in your school, when they're registered, are just left in a central grouping, the only class that you'll see is the default reading class, and that's what will show in this window. So automatically all of the students in your school will be accessible. So I'll go back to my reading demo group here. Now, you can see I have blue links into each student, and my students have unusual names because this is a demo database that I use for training. And the software does something very interesting here and helpful. It organizes the students automatically from those who may most need some teacher help at present to those who are moving along the most unencumbered at present. In other words, it says this student has a little up arrow, it says the student's progressing. That means the student is moving along well. Now, each of these little icons mean something. The down orange one means struggling. A down orange with a bar means the student's training has been paused and struggling. Now, all of these things are being done by the software. So the software itself is managing the students as they progress through the software. It's adapting to the way they're working. If they're struggling, it might pause the skill that they're on and give them the next skill that they were going to see and then bring them back. So the software is very much doing some of the teacher activities for us. So the teacher is very much monitoring what the students are doing. And if the students happen to have what's called a teacher time, that's the only time that the software will stop a student cold in his or her tracks. And what they'll see, they're working in a little simulated school environment. They have video guides who speak with them. And if a student, for some reason, may really need teacher assistance or attention at this time, the student's video guide will pop up on the screen and say, okay, teacher time. And if a student has a teacher time, an educator must remove this teacher time before the student can go any further. The reason for this is that the software wants to notify an educator that this student may strongly need some assistance. Now, let's just say, first of all, that I don't know what these little icons mean. Just to further illustrate the help function, if I click on the help function, I know on the right-hand side it will tell me about the screen that I'm looking at. And here are all of these little icons with what they mean. And the one that looks like a person with a speech bubble, that's the teacher time. And again, there's an embedded link here to give me a definition of what teacher time is. So I'll close up my help. And I want to go ahead, let's say, with this student here, and I want to find out first of all, what is happening with this student and what do I need to do to help the student, and should I remove this teacher time? Now, teacher times can always be removed from the management system, but if the students are in front of me and a student tells me I have a teacher time, I can go directly to the student's computer and I can remove the teacher time from there. Now, if I do it from the management system, it will give me perhaps more information about what's going on with this student, but I can remove it from the student computer. It will ask for your teacher login, your teacher password, username and password from the student computer. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drill down into this student's information screen. So I'll click on it, and now I have information specifically about that student. If I want to find out what training program is this student in and what has this student done so far in that training program, I can click on that link. I can see the student's in a 6-7 comprehensive stream. That's the name of the training program that was automatically assigned by the software after the student did the placement activity. So I click on that, and I can see that the first skill this student completed was rhyming, and this little up arrow indicates the student didn't have a lot of difficulty with that skill. This star indicates the student completed that activity, that training activity, at the default criteria. So if that star is there, that indicates that the student was able to master this activity or exercise at the default criteria. Now, I'm just going to scroll down, and we can see that the student was moving along very nicely. The student hit this 7th skill, visual match, consonant, vowel, consonant, letter patterns, which that particular skill is a visual match automaticity exercise, meaning that the student was pressing 1, 2, 3 on the keyboard, and you'll very quickly discover when you're working in the software, if they're working on a puzzle, they're either working on a sound matching activity or a letter sound activity. If they're pressing the 1, 2, 3 key, they're working on an automaticity exercise, and this pacing will come into play, and there are 2 sets of those. One is visual match, one is auditory visual match. So this student was struggling with this skill. The software paused that and moved them to the next skill. Now, if I go back here, I've got a little drop-down window, and I'll show it to you. I can also find out the student's ease of progress. So on the first skill, which was rhyming, it only took the student 4 minutes to master this, 2 puzzles, and normally it's 3 puzzles minimum unless they get a perfect puzzle. So the second puzzle, if it was 5 by 5, 25 rhyming items, the student got them all correct. So I can see the student in 5 trials mastered this skill, 7, and then when they got down to visual match, now took them 24 minutes, 15 sets to master it. So we can see not just their progress, but their ease of progress. I'm going to use the back arrow to get back to this student's screen. Now, what if I want to find out what the student is doing right now? Show trial details, and I can see that on the student's last 3 trials, which were trial 37, 38, and 39, if I go down here, I'll see P show up. P is a practice. So what it'll do sometimes if the student is struggling, it'll send them back for a practice. Now, I can see here the actual errors that this student is making. So the correct answer was PAB, and the student selected PEG. So I have that kind of information as well. Now, I know this student has had interventions. The interventions in this instance were made by the software. Academy intervention, Academy intervention. So the software, again, is monitoring what the student is doing and adapting and moving the student along, right? Now, it's pretty obvious the student is struggling here. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this student has a teacher time. And until somebody removes it, the student can go no further in his or her training. So if I click on clear teacher time, the student now can continue along where he or she left off, but I've been notified. Now, I can clear the teacher time, but what I want to be attentive to is what is happening here. And there's a recommendation. This student is having difficulty with pacing. And the recommendations that you will see, if it happens to be pacing, the software will give you, the teacher, information about how you might help the student to improve his or her pacing. If the student is having trouble with accuracy in an automaticity exercise, then the recommendations will be in relation to that. So we have to remember that the teacher time, although it stopped the student, the teacher time is more about us, the educators, telling us that this student needs attention. We don't want the student to go on training indefinitely on the same skill, lose motivation, become overly frustrated. So we're going to try to give this student some assistance. Now, when we log into the student screen, as we have here, there'll be links at the bottom of the screen. The second last link will always be to the skill the student is working on right now. And let's say that you decide as the teacher that you want to intervene. And I'll tell you that when the Academy intervenes, it usually makes smaller interventions to help the student, but they're not drastic. But let's say we know this particular student's on trial 38 or whatever it was, 37. I can click on Modify Mastery Criteria. Now it's telling me the skill the student is working on again. Because this is an automaticity exercise, we see accuracy is 96%. Now, automaticity exercises, they're always sets of 50. So 96% means that this student has to get 48 out of 50 3 times in a row, which is not easy to do. But you may recall when we looked at actually trial details for this student, the student did have 48 out of 50 or better the last 3 trials. But let's just say I just want to move this student along. I might go here, select 80. Now what has to happen is, to move past this exercise, this student must now get 3 sets in a row at 40 out of 50 or better. But often it's the pacing causing the issue. And if that happens to be the case, all you need to bear in mind, the pacing is how fast or slow is the student moving through each set. So each set of 50 is divided by 50 by the software to get an average response time for each item. And for automaticity, the software is measuring accuracy and pacing. And for 3 trials in a row, the student must be very accurate and be working at a consistent pace, rather that pace is relatively slower, average, or faster. But if the student can achieve that across 3 sets in a row to respond accurately and at a consistent pace over the 3 trials, we know that that skill has been automatized, that it's in the student's subconscious, and that the student can do it automatically. So we have to bear in mind that the Academy of Reading overtrains to the point where skills are not just mastered, but that they become subconscious. How does it do that? It measures accuracy and pacing. If I want to move the student past this skill, the bigger the number I select, 500 milliseconds, it just means that the larger the number I select, the more I'm removing pacing from the equation. So now I'm saying all we want is 3 sets in a row, 40 out of 50 or better, and the student can be speeding up and slowing down. If I click apply to current skill, rather than say the academy made this change, it will report the teacher change, and it will show that the accuracy has been changed from 96 to 80, and the pacing has been changed from 150 milliseconds to 500. So I'm going to just back up here. Now, in very rare instances, we may have students who require not just an intervention by the academy or by a teacher, but they require an accommodation. They're just not able to do it. So if I click on the bottom link, it says modify mastery criteria for an entire skill area. I can click on it, and I see each level of training that a student might do. The bottom of the pyramid, which is just working with the sounds. The next level up, letter sound, sound symbol relationships, visual matching, auditory visual matching, and then finally comprehension. So if I've decided for some reason I want to make a large change, maybe I have a student with fine motor coordination issues and they just mishit a lot of keys, I could go to visual matching and just say, okay, I'm going to set this at 90. So the student now is at 45 out of 50, and maybe give them a little more time for pacing. If I wish for some reason to remove pacing, not remove it completely, but just allow a fair bit of variance in the pacing, I could do that. Now, the change that we made before for that student was only on the skill they were on to help them over that bump. If I do this, you notice it says apply to skill area. Now, all of the visual match exercises will have this as the criteria. Now, I rarely, if ever, recommend making those kinds of accommodations because we have to remember that the software itself is designed as an intervention for students with a variety of reading delays or disabilities. So if you are going to, make an accommodation, you probably are going to wish to speak with Carol, to consult with Carol or with me directly.